everyone. I'm fresh off the plane from Davos, and before I get too far away from my time there, I wanted to make sure and give you my 4 takeaways from Davos 2026. Davos had every large corporation, bank, and every finance giant, and it is clear that financial services are the killer use case for blockchain technology. And maybe even more importantly, what's also clear, the true winner in Davos this year was digital assets. It was talked about across the board, the usefulness of digital assets, how they can make not just the businesses move more seamlessly, but how they can benefit the retail side and the SME side. So it was really great to see that this has now just become mainstream conversation about how digital assets can play such a role in this killer use case for financial services. There's a recognition that the tech is here, but there's still a gap for traditional finance on how to integrate it and what are the real risks associated with it. And one of the constant themes that I was engaged in conversation about was privacy. Institutions care about the privacy of their information. They also care about privacy on the retail side, but we need to be able to make sure in 2026 to solve this for them and to make them much more comfortable with using this technology so the risk of their information and their competitive information getting out is not going to be there for them. Trust was the word that every traditional financial corporation talked about when it came to this tech stack. We need to be able to prove to the industry that blockchain can be a trusted tool. So that's part of our remit moving forward. This is something that all of us collectively really need to go out and demonstrate. And it's not talking the talk, it's actually walking the walk. There was so much discussion about the importance of open public networks and the fact that infrastructure needed to remain open without gatekeepers and toll booths on the edge. So it needs to be much like the internet that we use on the content side of the web. We need to be able to maintain that openness, those permissionless networks, so that everyone feels comfortable using the technology. We don't want financial infrastructure to be able to use this tech stack and then end up in these closed verticals all along the way, because that just sort of ruins the whole game of it. So those are my 4 takeaways from Davos 2026. And we have already started working on each of these issues, and I really want to work together as an ecosystem to be able to bring this to life.
Alrighty, everybody, what is going on? Welcome back to another CYPRX video breakdown. I have an absolute slammer for you guys today. So with that being said, let's jump in. We're going to be diving into how Bank of America CEO specifically described crypto and said that banks will come in hard to the crypto ecosystem on the transactional side of things once regulatory clarity is here. We're going to be diving into this documented piece from Temple that they just put out on Canton Network, showing you guys that this aligns exactly with what Stellar Development's Danielle Dixon just said to you guys in the opening portion of today's video breakdown. And then if we have time, we'll dive into some technical analysis updates on Canton Coin if we don't supersede 20 minutes. And if not, then I'll make sure to update you guys via our fundamental backdrop to start the week off with XRP technical analysis and Canton Coin technical analysis in tomorrow's video breakdown. So with that being said, let's dive in. Now, I love listening to Danielle Dixon. She's always super intuitive and tapped into what's going on with the space. And as you guys heard, she specifically mentioned that everybody at Davos, including the large financial institutions, was focused on digital assets, privacy, openness, interoperability, infrastructure, so on and so forth. And that aligns exactly with Canton Network. Now, if you guys remember in the previous video breakdown, we had touched on this blockchain catalyst platform, this catalyst blockchain platform that helps these large financial institutions integrate supported protocols into their backend core infrastructure. And here you can see Hyperledger Fabric Canton sitting right next to Stellar and right above Corda. I personally love seeing that. We touched on this company and organization in the previous video breakdown to show you guys how interwoven into the financial ecosystem Canton is. Coming over here to this podcast from Anamako Brands that was uploaded just a month ago, Eric from Digital Asset goes on to talk about how institutions that have never, ever held cryptocurrency on their balance sheet are interested in even currently holding Canton Coin. Take a second here and listen.
And also to double click on that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's no pre-mined tokens, no VC allocations. All the value goes to the people who actually provide value.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, again, a lot of people talk about building decentralized networks and then they don't actually stand by it or mean it. And, rather than kind of toot our horn about how we did it, the results, I think, speak for themselves. launched during Gensler. Digital Assets headquarters are in New York. I've not lost a single night of sleep over this. We have publicly traded financial companies that have never touched crypto before that were launch miners in the ecosystem. There are people that participate in the coin, entities that participate with the coin that have never touched crypto before, and that just like, yeah, this makes perfect sense. Actually, this is totally appropriate. We can participate, not just hold, but be active in this ecosystem. And it meant no pre-mine, no pre-sale, no ICO, no sale to the public, launching fully decentralized. So there are no centralized components. The foundation is actually governed by the community. The foundation doesn't control the network. It's one of many votes. There's so many different layers of decentralization built into its governance, and launched from zero. And all the coins that you see in distribution today have been earned by someone that did something useful in the network.
So I just love that statement, especially in regards to what Danielle Dixon said the environment was like at Davos, how every financial institution was focused on digital assets. Coming over here, shout out to Melvis BZNZ over on X for posting this piece from Temple Digital Group. Now, I went ahead and made my own commentary on this where I said, regulated and compliant institutional grade trading infrastructure for tokenized assets built by veterans from Goldman Sachs and DRW just said in this post, which we're going to read thoroughly through today. Temple Digital Group believes that there is an asymmetric opportunity to build on the canonical environment for capital markets with Canton's unified technical stack. And they also said that blockchains will become Canton network clients. Now, when I read that, which we'll get into this piece here in just a second from Temple Digital, I remembered that Ripple just became an early adopter of BNY's tokenized deposit services through its digital asset platform for cash flow management and liquidity optimization, which sits on Canton architecture. BNY enables the on-chain mirrored representation of client deposit balance on its digital assets platform, and BNY's digital asset platform mirrors tokens of the money market fund shares created utilizing GSDAP, or Goldman Sachs Digital Asset Platform, which is an award-winning technology platform that is developed by Goldman Sachs Digital Assets, which leverages solutions developed by Digital Asset. And I even tagged the in-depth post where I went over this in detail. Here you can see in the documents, it specifically says, today, they announced a collaborative initiative with Goldman Sachs, which BNY will deploy blockchain technology developed by Goldman Sachs to maintain records of customers' ownership of select money market funds. Money market funds via BNY's Liquidity Direct and digital asset platform, the corresponding value of which will be represented through a mirrored record tokenization utilizing GSDAP. And again, remember, showing you guys all this documentation to put an end to this, it says right here on the Canton network, BNY clients can now access tokenized money market funds with ownership records on GSDAP, which is built on the Canton network. So it's just so interesting that in this document that we're going to read today, it specifically talks about how blockchains will become clients of Canton. And Ripple just a few days ago adopted BNY's tokenized digital asset platform technology, and it sits on Canton infrastructure. So I just found that to be very interesting. Let's dive into this piece here from Temple Digital Group. Now, if you guys don't know who Temple Digital Group is, I did a full in-depth video breakdown on this before in a prior video. So let's dive into this piece from Temple Digital Group, the Canton thesis, a unified technical stack for capital markets. Capital markets are experiencing a renaissance. I'm going to just make highlights as we go through this. Digital infrastructure is reshaping the financial supply chain into a seamless, connected system. This transformation requires a unified tech stack for capital markets composed of modular technologies that communicate freely with one another. This new architecture must allow the international monetary system to be rebuilt by organizations in a neutral, private, and compliant way. The Temple Digital Group believes that there is an asymmetric opportunity to build a canonical environment for capital markets with Canton's unified stack. Canton, the open institutional network. The use of decentralized networks for institutional application is not a new phenomenon. Once known as permission, These blockchain implementations were abandoned due to connectivity issues with the broader digital economy. Thanks to a decade of innovation, solutions are now available that support enterprises by offering privacy, which is something that Danielle Dixon hinted at, safety, control, permissioning, and interoperability. Solutions offer maximum control over who may access certain networks, data, and applications. Solutions are inherently sovereign, where large institutions have the flexibility to define their own governance models. Solutions are designed for openness and connectivity, where they offer networks within the system connected and interface with the complementary blockchain technologies. And privacy is available at the application and network and transactional level, where users and validators can whitelist in a very granular way specific functionality that aligns with an organization's regulatory or compliance requirements. The Canton Capital Markets thesis. Institutional adoption is a non-technical competitive moat. In the past, generalist blockchain supported all use cases while competing on technical attributes. Now, networks that have the ability to bring entire sectors of infrastructure online leverage technology to build non-technical competitive moats. We believe Canton will become open and connected faster than existing networks can integrate new cryptography and procedures to become private and compliant. I'm going to highlight that one right there. The ability for markets to remain open and counterparties to coordinate in real time represents a structural transformation for the industry. Canton moves away from facilitating tokenized assets as digital twins to enable true representations of digital native assets on chain. Mind you, again, this piece was put out by an organization in this space that provides a institutional grade trading platform for market makers, financial institutions, banks, large hedge funds, so on and so forth. The digital asset industry will connect to Canton. Organizations are empowered to operate within an open standard while maintaining independence, connectivity, and strong economic incentives. Existing blockchain networks need capital markets. Canton is the capital market service provider for blockchains. 1. Maslow's hierarchy of protocol needs. Almost all blockchain protocols evolve to cater to enterprise and institutional use cases. Vast sums of money, time, and attention are directed to crossing the chasm. It's incredibly difficult for legacy blockchains to interface directly with organizations because of early technical decisions. The blockchain economy illustrates that consolidation is neither immediate nor inevitable. There is a strong economic incentive to bring breakthroughs in cryptography and network architectures to market. Canton is not competing with existing blockchains. I love that. Thank God. Highlight that right there. Canton is not competing with existing blockchains. What you will see is such a massive disconnect where you have never seen Ripple or Canton themselves or Brad Garlinghouse or Yuval Ruse battle each other on Twitter or YouTube talking about which chain is better, which one's going to win. They never do that. It's always people on Twitter that make content and opinionated pieces that make it seem like there's some battle between XRP, Stellar, Quant, Link, Canton, or whatever, but it's never the actual people that are building the technology, nor the institutions that are participating in this space, the likes of people that are building trading venues for institutions like Temple. Canton is not competing with existing blockchains. In the traditional sense, the system should be thought of as an open network of public and private networks whose goal is to connect with as many ecosystems as possible. Asset virtualization. Asset virtualization refers to the method for decentralized networks to coordinate and exchange assets via verification. When an action takes place in a projected virtual environment on another blockchain, its state is communicated back to Canton and Temple without bridging, providing greater security and compliance procedures for counterparties. Asset virtualization will enable blockchains such as Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana to interact with Canton's unified technical stack for capital markets, making Canton the canonical environment to access on-chain global finance. Historically, securities and infrastructure and decentralized applications could not interoperate due to the regulatory requirements of traditional finance. Compliance mandates excluded both groups from interacting with one another, resulting in years of divergent platform specifications. Because of this history, platforms today tend to serve either institutional or decentralized users. Rarely does a platform accommodate both groups simultaneously. Temple blends the compliance, controls, and connectivity of traditional finance with speed, programmability, and 24/7 settlement advantages of decentralized systems, and it runs on Canton. The world runs on incentives. We believe that Canton's technology incentivizes the world's institutions to collectively rebuild the financial supply chain. Instead of a monolithic approach, each actor develops its own solutions and interfaces with a standard protocol that is maximally private, secure, and connected. With new technologies and clear regulatory landscapes, organizations are empowered to interact with on-chain securities just as easily as DeFi instruments and are free to connect their own environment to the greater digital asset ecosystem without vendor lock-in. Last but not least, it says Temple believes in the vision of Canton, and as the network's first native trading and liquidity platform, it is positioned at the center of the biggest digital transformation of the 21st century. What a phenomenal piece by Temple. Again, shout out to this individual over here on X, Melvis BZNZ, for posting that one for the read today. Coming over here to this document from Andre Casterman. He put this out on his LinkedIn profile just the other day, and this just solidifies the full circle back to what Daniel Dixon said from Davos 2026. Andre Casterman also said, Davos 2026, from whether crypto to building the financial infrastructure. World Economic Forum just flipped the script. Digital assets aren't speculation anymore. They are core market infrastructure. Tokenization is the name of the game. Banks are coming hard on transactions once rules clarify. That was directly from Bank of America's Brian Mohanahan. Hopefully I'm pronouncing his name correctly. So let's click open the docs real quick and just take a real fast peek. You can see Andre Casterman, founder of Casterman Advisory and the executive advisor of XDC Network, put this little tiny piece out. It says World Economic Forum 2026 signals a clear shift for banks and asset managers. The debate is no longer whether crypto, but now how to integrate tokenization, digital assets, and new rails into existing businesses. Digital assets are framed as the next iteration of financial market infrastructure for payments, funding, and investment products, not a speculative sideline. That is huge confirmation coming from the world leaders of this globe at this year's Davos event. As the market matures, 2026 marks the shift from experimentation to scaled regulated deployment in payments, collateral, and securities markets, with the wholesale use cases leading retail adoption right down there in the bottom left-hand corner. Then last but not least, to save time for the sake of this video breakdown, so we can just take a real quick look at some technical levels on Canton Coin. Here you have Bank of America CEO coming in and saying, once clear regulatory rules make crypto a real thing that you can actually do business with, banks will come in hard on the transactional side of it. Now, this reminds me of what the gentleman from Grayscale said the other day, that you don't want to get into crypto after the regulations come in.
Well, a lot of moving pieces. You know, on the narrow issue of institutions, traditional banks, investment banks, broker dealers engaging with crypto. Look, what we see is everybody is building, and nobody is going to wait until President Trump's signature hits the legislation to begin building in the space. There's lots of competitive dynamics at play. If you wait until the legislation is done to begin kind of planning and investing, you're going to be behind your competitors. So all these big institutions.
This makes so much sense. I have a firm belief that once regulatory rules are set in place and these institutions on board with billions to possibly even trillions of dollars, we are not going to see a total cryptocurrency market cap sub $3 trillion as an opportunity anymore. Even in the future, let's say we go up to 5, 6, 10 trillion dollars plus, we're not going to see the market pull back to $3 trillion ever again. There's going to be a moment in history where that transition actually happens, just like in the stock market, which is worth trillions, multiple trillions of dollars, right? It's never going to be sub, $50 trillion ever again. So take that into consideration, how massive of an opportunity this is to get in at literally ground zero in this digital asset ecosystem on projects that I hope you're doing research on that have the possibility to survive long-term in this space. Projects that actually solve real-world problems and bring real value to the global economy. Now, with that being said, let's roll over and do some real quick technical analysis and take a look at the levels on Canton. We have not had any updates since our last update on Canton's technical analysis levels to be paying attention to and mindful of, but we have started to poke slightly above the psychological level over here at the 15,237 that we had mentioned in a previous video breakdown. When we were trading down here at roughly around the 12,257, we mentioned that the next area of interest, if we can hold the 12,257 as support, will be the 15,237. So with the bearish case in mind first, if we cannot see buyers become aggressive enough to hold the 15,237 and turn it into support, trap sellers at these levels, and become aggressive enough to start to push up into the 18,194 in the coming days ahead. What I'm paying attention to is if we can see sellers start to trap buyers like they did here in previous days, looking back from a couple weeks ago. And if sellers overpower buyers and we start to see the 15,237 act as a resistance, it is possible that we start to correct some of this recent bullish move on Canton. With that in mind, the first target to the downside for a possible revisitation and accumulation targets on Canton would be the 12,257. If sentiment were to worsen and we were to break the 12,257 and we do not come and target the high over here at roughly around 17.5 cents, then most likely what we're going to see is that sellers are too strong here in this area. They're throwing up a passive wall. They're becoming aggressive enough to push price back down to the lows, and they're most likely going to target the lows. With that in mind, that would open the door for a possible revisitation of the 0.999 cent psychological level as our next bearish target below 12,257. I'm sure that we will have an update well before then. However, these are the first two bearish targets that I'm looking at. If we cannot see a nice bullish push to target the local highs from back on January 1st, 2026 on Canton Coin. Now, if we can see buyers start to hold and become aggressive above the 12,237, then that will open the door for buyers to start to target the sellers that exist above the highs from January 1st, and that will open the door for the first institutional sell dark pool above the 15,237 that comes in at the 18,194. If at any point in time we were to see buyers become aggressive enough to break the 18,194, I have a firm belief that we're going to start to see a sell squeeze, and we're going to start to see all the over-leveraged traders that exist above these highs get liquidated, and we're likely going to see an opportune moment on Canton Coin's price action where we start to jump into price discovery mode. Now, to the upside, with that in mind, the levels that we have above 18,194 come in at the 21,363 cent psychological level, the 24,055, and the 27,279. These are all the updated levels via our institutional software. And so hopefully you guys have enjoyed the accurate updates, not giving you guys any overextensive price targets or predictions or any moonboy bullish bullcrap. You guys can see how accurate these levels are. Right now, after our last update from the 12,257, and we mentioned price coming up into the 15,237, you can see that this is now acting right now currently as a consolidation area where we are seeing a battle between buyers and sellers. So the question is, can we hold this as a support and see buyers push up into the next institutional sell dark pool, or do sellers start to defend, trap buyers at highs, turn it into a resistance, and we start to make our way back down into the lows? With all of that in mind, remember, none of this is financial advice. I'm not telling you guys to go out there and buy XRP, XLM, Canton Coin, and none of the digital assets in which we briefly mentioned in today's video breakdown. Always go out there and do your own personal research. If you guys want a safe place to go out there and do research on any of these digital assets or blockchain projects, you guys have the CYPRX research community, which is one of the most comprehensive research-based communities on the face of the internet. No hopium, no hype, all just documented research. Some of the research in which we shared today is constantly shared with inside the private CYPRX Discord. We'd love to have you on the team. With that being said, many blessings to you guys. If you're not subscribed to the platform, do us that favor now, subscribe, and before you head off, smash that thumbs up button. And as always, we'll see you guys in the next video breakdown.